but you create an environment that they love serving in, and it's easy for them to serve in, and they feel loved, seen, appreciated. I mean, it does mirror the health of your overall youth ministry. And I think that's where growth comes from. Growth always, to me, comes from true health, and true health starts with leadership.
What's going on, youth pastors? In this interview, I sit down with Kristen Lascola of North Coast Church, who does so many things from youth ministry resourcing. She's got an incredible YouTube channel with tons of great stuff on there. Her and her husband, Jeff, do an incredible podcast. So go check it out and enjoy this conversation as we get into so much about middle school ministry, about how to grow and resource your team, and how to reach more students for Christ. Enjoy. I've benefited a ton from your stuff over the years, and a lot of other people that have been, really consistent with putting out great content that's super practical over the years. And you were like on my top of my list of like, man, some people I'd love to interview, sit down with, get to hear a little bit of their story, what's kept them in ministry for a long time. But just as we get into it, Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into ministry, and why you're like, hey, youth ministry is what my calling is, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I bet you a lot of youth pastors have a similar story where they didn't grow up thinking, I'm going to be a youth pastor someday. I didn't think it was an option. I didn't look at it as a potential career path or anything like that. It was more like I stumbled into it, or I always say God just opened doors and I decided to walk through them. I was kind of randomly, I ran into one of our junior high directors at Starbucks one day, and she thought I was waving at her. I was like 18 at the time, and I like vaguely recognized her, but I wasn't waving at her. I was like doing some other gesture, but she thought I was waving, and she comes over and she's like, hey, are you guys going to the college group tonight? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe. She's like, oh, so good to see you. We chatted, and then she went home and told my sister, like called her and was like, oh my gosh, I just ran into your sister. She's so friendly. I'm like, okay. She's like, does she want to be a junior high small group leader? So my sister asked me, I'm like, oh yeah, I did run into her. I'm like, sure, I'll go check it out. And that was kind of how I got my start. I was not waving at someone who thought I was friendly and was like, why don't you come and do this with us? So after a year of volunteering, I really was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I never would have chosen this for myself. And she was like, I think you're doing a really good job as a volunteer. I'm looking for an intern. Do you want to be my intern? I'm like, what does an intern do? Like, I don't know. Like, I was in college and working another job, and I was like, okay, I'll be your intern. And then she was like, actually, a year after that, she's like, I'm leaving my director position. Do you want to interview for it? And I was like, okay, sure, I'll interview for it. So then I got that job. And then a year after that, they were like, hey, we opened our first offsite venue. We're a multi-site church. The main campus is in Vista, California. And there was a town about 20 minutes inland called Fallbrook, and they opened a campus there. And they had a junior high pastor there for 1 year, and then he left. And they said, we think you should interview for that job. And I was like, just be out there on my own, like as the pastor. Cause the Vista camp was so big. We were a paid staff of 10 just for the junior high ministry. And I didn't know anything else. I didn't know small ministry. I didn't know offsite ministry. I didn't know anything.
Which there's a lot of support system if you're in that kind of environment. It's one thing to do youth ministry when you're like, hey, we need you to be youth, young adults, this, that. You get 4 volunteers right now, and there's like 12 kids, and none of them are friends, and like that's a totally different ball game than when you go and you're like, man, there's thousands of people involved, but there's a lot of training wheels, I feel like, that come along, like when you're at some of those like bigger, like a lot of systems are pre-made for you, so it's like
100%.
That can be really intimidating. Probably almost you're like, I know I'm kind of downshifting probably in scale, but you're sort of up, you're upgrading the responsibility of like, okay, I got to figure a lot of stuff out here.
You're 100% right. And like the numbers were lower because we were used to like, of course, 300 kids are coming on a Tuesday. It's the Vista campus, and then I show up, I decided to take the job. And I remember showing up at this community center because they didn't have a building. and there was like 11 kids in this classroom, and I was like, hello everyone, I am your new youth pastor. And you're right,
That
like,
one kid's on his PSP in the corner, like
I
not
know,
looking.
just
You're
like,
like, oh
meh.
no. All right, we're gonna playing the
But
long game.
it was like this, like, excitement, but also, oh my gosh, what have I
Yeah.
done, kind of thing. Like, it's up to me. Like you said, my leadership had to go up a gear, the numbers went down, but I was like, all right, I'm in charge and I have to figure this thing out. And so, the learning curve, I will admit, was super slow. I was so young. I was way in over my head, even though it was a smaller ministry. And I was just like, here we go. And it took me years to sort of figure it out. But I used just all kinds of resources available to me, and, finally started to crack the code on my specific ministry and context and community. And, Fallbrook was so different than Vista in a lot of ways, and having to acclimate to that new environment. But here I am. I'm still the junior high pastor at the Fallbrook campus for North Coast Church. And here we are. We're thriving. It just took a little while to get the thing off the ground.
Well, isn't it awesome to see, just like the faithfulness of God? Like, I always
Yeah.
I did a training recently with our team, and I was like, guys, I know your time is strapped. We're out in the suburbs, like mostly parents and people with little kids at our campus. And I'm like, I get it. You don't have a whole lot of time to like give to students outside of the main program. But like, look at your schedule, just like that little boy with the loaves and the fishes, offering them to Jesus. Say, I don't have much, but this is what I do have. I think even as a leader, even as a staff person, you're you're saying, I don't, maybe I don't feel equipped. I don't feel like I have very much. I don't know. I felt that way many times. Still feel that way. And I've been doing this almost a decade, right? Like, like where I'm like, God, I don't really have very much, but I'm going to give you what I do have. Will you please
Yeah.
multiply it? And just probably seeing how God's multiplied your ministry over the years has probably been pretty cool. So I would love to hear a little bit about that. Like, how have you seen it change and evolve, and how have you maybe as a leader continued to upgrade and level up your own leadership, and seeing God use that to reach more students, to grow, to bring more people onto the team. Talk through us maybe a little bit of that growth journey.
Yeah. And that's a great word to use. It was definitely a journey. I know in youth ministry circles, everyone's always saying, find a mentor, and, all of that. And that is, from my experience, maybe this isn't everyone's experience, that was definitely easier said than done. I was definitely looking for help, or someone who would kind of take me under their wing, or like teach me the ways and show me what's next. Um, and I couldn't find that person. I couldn't find um, someone who could show me next steps. And so I had to kind of figure out those people on my own. So,
Mm.
that came in the form of finding mentors out in the larger context of youth ministry. So I just started going to work, hitting the books. I would order books. I would read anything on youth ministry I could get my hands on. This is before the internet really blew up with so many youth ministry resources. I think we're so lucky now that there's so many people doing really great things to help youth pastors win. But those resources, this was so long ago that it was like I would find a book, or I would subscribe to a magazine, or there were a few blogs out there that, were offering some help. And I just studied everything I could and implemented what I could, and read leadership books to up my game as a leader personally. So I would just, okay, let's read Patrick Lencioni or John Maxwell or Craig Groeschel, and I would try to sharpen my leadership side. And then I would get like Doug Fields resources, and is it Wayne Rice? He wrote some book a long time ago, and I would just like, okay, now let me up my youth ministry side. And I was constantly trying to sharpen these two sides of myself, like become a really good godly leader and learn how to youth pastor, and try to marry those two things together to see some growth. And I think it was a super humbling experience because when you work at a large church, you just take for granted, like you said, those systems are in place. And it's like, well, if I don't show up, good ministry is still going to happen. Like I'm one little cog in the system and they need me, but it's not devastating. Like whether I come to program or not, if I miss, so many other people. But then it was kind of ride or die. Like all of this is on my shoulders. And I just started slowly implementing things. Like when I got there, the program was an hour and a half, and it was like they didn't have worship, they didn't have a student leadership team. They did have small groups, so I just kept that going. There were things that I'm like, all right, next goal on my list, we need to make our program longer. Got to change that culture, get parent buy-in for that. Next thing on my list, I need to create a worship culture. We need to be doing worship on youth group nights or whatever. Next on my list, this camp that the old youth pastor had put in place, it's not going to work for us. I need to figure out a new camp that something is, so it was like sort of like one little project at a time. I was careful not to come in and just like, all right, listen up, guys, I'm redoing everything. Partly because I didn't know how to. I didn't even know like the scale of which I needed to figure some stuff out. But just, taking things one, and I didn't have any staff. It's not like I had an intern or a director or guys director or anything alongside me. So it was like I can figure out one project at a time. And that's why it took years to really grow, is because like, all right, 6 months we got to figure out worship, 6 months we got to figure out events, 6 months we got to figure out student leadership, 6 months we got to figure out our global calendar of what we do and what works and what doesn't, and all those things just take a lot of time, and all the while we don't have a building. So that presented a whole other challenge because we were in multiple locations, like Sundays here, but Tuesdays here, and we're all one church, but invite your friends, but you don't know where to go. And it was confusing and a real hindrance to our growth at that time. So then we got into a building, a permanent 24/7 facility, which really, I mean, people always say, like they would try to be encouraging, like, hey, it doesn't matter, like church can be anywhere. And it's like, well, having a sweet facility really does help your growth and help your attendance, your retention, the vibe. I mean, your ministry could suck, so they're not going to come back if it's, wow, look at this great building, but nothing spiritual is happening, nothing fun is happening, whatever. But if you have a really good ministry, even like, I mean, putting it in like a warehouse with no bells or whistles, I mean, our budget was so small. I started doing ministry one way, and then I took that same ministry and I put it into a really sweet facility, and our growth went through the roof. And so I'm like,
Yeah,
I didn't.
because it's not built on a concept of something like, oh, like if we just have this factor, that's going to be the only thing. You also, in your ministries, I think, which I'd love to, I'm sure we'll get into, is more, it's built on relationships. It's built on things that really
Totally.
matter.
Yeah.
It's not built on the building. It's not built on, some little quick, trick.
Right.
It's not built on a gimmick. Your ministry is built on the gospel. Your ministry is built on the backs of relationships with Christ and on relationships with amazing people and on loving them. And like, I think I totally believe in that classic principle that healthy things grow.
Mm,
Because it just is what it is. To your point, yeah, if there's nothing spiritual happening, like if the Holy Spirit's not working in this place, if he's not, if people aren't bearing fruit, then you might be able to draw a crowd when you have a fun event. But that's not going to bear long lasting life change. And you
yeah,
probably, as a leader,
exactly.
you're not going to stay long term. Which has been pretty cool to see that, like you said, that and I think there's a lot to be said about being planted. I
Mm,
just think like that's, and I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard that, but the principle of like, I just is what it is. You can't really grow your ministry if you're moving somewhere every 2.5 years, if you're
yeah,
moving somewhere every 3 years. Not that you can't bless people, not that you can't make an impact, but if
sure.
you really want to build something that's going to be lasting,
Hmm.
and the Lord uses everyone. The Lord uses, if you have a calling to go be a serial planter, or kind of have an apostolic gift to go start. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that with the different people that you've worked with over the years. But I would love to maybe hear your thoughts just on the significance of being planted somewhere long term, and
Yeah.
how you've seen that bear fruit in your own ministry. Hey, real quick, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and watching this podcast, wherever it is, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're watching this. And I just want to ask a big personal ask of you. And that is, one, if you are watching this and you're not subscribed, to please hit the subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on upcoming content coming your way, resources, videos, trainings, all those things. It does our show a huge service if you like the episode, if you subscribe. And please, if this is helpful for you, share it with a friend, someone in ministry, another youth leader, another youth pastor. That's how we grow this in order to impact and encourage more leaders in ministry. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up, because hearing you talk about like moving to a different ministry every 2 or 3 years, it's like, maybe relatively speaking, you might think, oh, I've been here a long time, but in true ministry, it's like you're just getting started. Like, our senior pastor always says, like, that when we hire a new youth pastor, they'll come to him and be like, so how am I doing? Like, what do you think? How am I doing? What can I do better? He goes, ask me in 5 years. Like, you haven't even started until you have 5 years in one place under your belt.
You're like, bro, you
And
can't even remember all the kids' names yet.
I
What are you
know.
talking about? How you doing? Like,
Well, and his, like, which I'm like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. He's like, until you've graduated an entire class and then seen the fruit, so kind of to your question, like, sticking in one place for a long time, fruit, like, that is like what the evidence of, am I doing this well? Do we have an effective ministry? I don't think you can tell that in a year, 2 years, a year and a half, whatever like the lifespan of a youth pastor used to be, because once you get a whole class start to finish through your ministry, and then you watch and you see what happens. And for me, the biggest blessing has been, and this totally caught me off guard, this wasn't part of my strategy, but we were doing ministry to the point where kids who left, graduated, could not wait to come back
I
and
love that.
serve. And it's been so amazing. Like, those kids who were the squirrely junior hires just on our student leadership team, usually trying to figure their faith out. And then they go up to high school. And then the first thing they do is, I mean, they start bugging me as a junior, but like, I want to come back. I want to come back. I want to be a leader. And that has been my constant recruitment cycle, for the last 10 years. Like, they're ex-students who just grew and loved um, the program, where their faith became real to them, and they have these memories, and now they're like, I want to do that for somebody else. And so to me, that's the sweetest fruit of watching them. Now they're adults and they're coming back, mentoring kids, the kid they used to be, and being able to continue that relationship with them. Like, whether like, I've got to perform some of their weddings, and like, just watch them go into adulthood and have babies, and create this community of like, I'm still here. I got to watch you guys go from 11-year-olds to parents, and hire a lot of them, whether they've been my admins or interns, volunteers, whatever it might be, worship leaders. It's so cool to watch. Like, your faith didn't stop when you left my program. You carried that with you, and now you want to continue the ministry in another way. Like, I can't even tell you, like, that has been the biggest reward of longevity. And, like, um, you build this culture, I feel like you become just like a pillar in your church of people trusting you. Like, it's amazing what weird opportunities and relationships open up just because you've been there for a long time.
Yeah.
People look to you as someone that they can trust or open up to. I mean, my primary job, of course, is junior hires, but I do a ton of adult ministry just because I've been there for so long. And people want someone to talk to, or people need a phone call or prayer or light pastoral counseling or whatever. And so I get to expand my world beyond just youth ministry because they don't just see me as the youth pastor. It's like they see me as one of the pastors of
Right.
our campus and
I've got a friend who works
reach
for
out.
he did youth ministry for about 10 years in Kansas City, and now he's a part of a really large house church network. One of the bigger ones that I'm aware of in the Midwest, which is really cool, based out of Kansas City. But he's in a support raised role, and I saw him at a grad party, and to his point, he was last summer, and he's like, man, if you ever are trying to go into missions, or you ever have a calling, that's going to need to be in a support role, he's like, if you've been a youth pastor and you've seen a whole class of kids through, he's like, if you treat people's kids and you love them like Christ, and you help shepherds kids, like, those parents will give you the world. Like, those people will
So
give you
true.
what, just to the point of like that the impact that you have has such a multiplying effect, because of just the sacredness of working with people's children, and how valuable
Absolutely.
that is and how important that is. Um, and that's huge. And it's probably really cool to see, the opportunities that you've seen open up in your life, and the relationships, and the way that God's blessed you, and just in ways probably you never thought. But
Hmm.
just to pivot a little bit, um, I'd love to talk a little bit about this concept of growth and growing ministries. So I
Hmm.
know that you have some amazing resources out there, for youth ministers that are looking to grow their churches, looking to grow their impact, looking to reach more people, from practical stuff like games and how to structure your night, how to do training. I know you do coaching and development stuff as well. But from your perspective over the years, and I'm curious to see how that's changed, like, what do you think it really means to grow? And how do you measure that, like, in your own life? How do you measure that in your ministry, um, in a healthy way?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head on in a healthy way. We always say we always have to focus on health over growth. So if you're trying to grow your ministry, ironically, the name of our website is growyouryouthministry.com. That's where the course is. And so we know that people are very interested in, how do I grow my youth ministry? And like you said, we have the Ministry Coach podcast where we give people tips on this all the time of how to grow, but not in, um, like you said earlier, it's not a gimmick because, like you said, healthy things grow, but also tumors grow and weeds grow. And, if they are given the right fuel, they will. And there can be very unhealthy growth in youth ministry that's built on um, gimmicky kind of things. And sometimes that can make us feel successful, like we're swelling up. But I found that the healthiest growth takes time because it's built on um, the health of leaders, I think, is primary. So, like, before you do anything else as a youth pastor, like getting that team of volunteer um, volunteers, and or if you have the capacity or capability to hire like an intern or director team to work alongside of you, but the entire ministry will be built on healthy leadership. um, One of our executive pastors used to always say every organization is a direct reflection of its leadership.
Hmm.
So everything that happens in a ministry, healthy and unhealthy, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what the boundaries are, what the focus is, what's permissible, where that culture comes from. It's a direct reflection of leadership. Everything in our youth ministry is. So that's why, in the beginning, I was saying I was always trying to develop myself as a leader and a pastor simultaneously. I wanted to do good youth ministry, but I wanted to be a very capable leader who made good choices and built health. So, you have to work on your own leadership skills, but make sure you're pouring into the overall health of your ministry team with you. And we've done a ton of videos on that, but just how to get the right people in those seats and make sure that they're not just like a volunteer, but are they the right volunteer? Do they have a heart for students? Are they living a life like in their personal life that's above reproach? Like, are they people with integrity? Do they love the Lord? Are they a right fit for the age group you work in? Because sometimes it might be like, oh, you're a really good volunteer, but I see you more with high schoolers. And then a good fit with your energy of what your youth ministry is like. I have a super high energy youth ministry, probably because I have a ton of energy. It's the direct reflection of its leadership. I'm always like, let's party, let's dance, let's run around, let's go nuts. And I've had leaders come in and they're like, whoa, this is
A
a
lot
lot.
for
This
me.
is a lot. And I'm like, and it's like, you're right, it is. And this just might not be for you. And then I have other leaders who they're not wild and crazy. They're like more mellow, but they love the energy and they can hang with it.
Yeah.
And so you need to make sure that they're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for them. You don't want it to always be like, ugh. And so here's circling back. If your recruiting ground is previous students, they're already in it. They already know what to expect. It's not culture shock. This is the youth ministry they grew up in. And when it's the youth ministry they serve in, it's like, I know this place. I'm very comfortable here. I know the culture. And so that healthy growth does take time because you have to set a culture of healthy leadership.
Mm.
And then when those leaders come back, that is like the biggest win ever because you don't have to teach them the ways of your ministry. They already know the ways, and that's why they're there. They want to come back. But then that begs the question, too, of creating a youth ministry that people can't wait to come back to
Yeah.
and creating a ministry that people want to serve in. And a lot of that comes down to the youth pastor. I think my big focus when we were small, believe it or not, was not students. I focused on students, but I think I knew deep down intuitively they will leave, like I'm going to have them for 3 years and then they're gone. At that time, only two. We did seventh and eighth for a while, and then I absorbed sixth about halfway in. And it's like, okay, I love the students, I'm here for them, but I probably put most of my relational effort and time into my leaders. So I would write them handwritten cards and take them out to lunch and plan fun nights, like where we all got together and did like an escape room or whatever, like just fun things. And I was trying to foster community that I was hoping would trickle out into the youth ministry culture. Like, if these leaders are healthy and if these leaders are connected relationally and happy and feel cared for, loved, seen, poured into, then that will transfer to the bigger picture of youth ministry. And I've had leaders, I mean, right now, my longest standing leader, he's been with me for 13 years.
I
Um,
love that.
I do too. And I want to keep them as long as possible. But, you create an environment that they love serving in and it's easy for them to serve in and they feel loved, seen, appreciated. I mean, it does mirror the health of your overall youth ministry. And I think that's where growth comes from. Growth always, to me, comes from true health, and true health
Yeah.
starts with leadership.
On that, what are some key habits, key traits? Because I think like that's a great concept. I love, and I completely agree with you 1000%. Like it's all going to be about culture, and that starts with the culture of your own life. We had some guy from Chick-fil-A come to our all staff yesterday, and he was talking all about how do you build culture, and how do you do it in your own life, in your own home, trickling into whatever that God's given you to lead. Which I thought was a great question, and that's really what
Mm-hmm.
you've been talking about is developing, a culture of health, and creating spaces that students love to be in. But what are some key traits, habits, take homes. I'm just thinking of trying to get really granular, practical for anybody
Yeah.
listening to this. Like, man, if there's 3, 4, 5 things for me to focus on to become that type of person, to become that kind of leader, to become that kind of youth pastor, what are some things that come to mind there?
Yeah. I love that you asked that because we love getting practical, like on our podcast. It's like, tell, because that's what I wanted. Someone tell me how. Don't tell me the theory. Tell me like literally what to do. Step one, do this. So, for what that looks like in my ministry, is like I said before, um, the adult ministry that I just by default kind of end up doing because I've been there so long. Do not underestimate your leaders need pastoring.
Hmm.
And I think we just assume, okay, you're a leader, like the pastoring is going to happen with students, but it is crazy the when I take a leader out to lunch or out to coffee, or some leaders want to walk and we just go on a walk together. Um, Whatever, however you're spending time with them, make sure you're spending one-on-one time with your leaders. I know, like, there's all these weird, I get a lot of questions from youth pastors like, well, I'm a male and she's a female and how do we do this and blah blah blah. I'm like, there's ways, without it being weird or anyone being uncomfortable. You Hey, come by the church, you meet in a public place, I'll grab your favorite coffee and we'll just sit in the lobby and chat,
Yeah. Or if you're
that's fine.
talkers, I mean, I'm thinking about, I've seen that change in my life, and now we've got, I get to co-lead at my campus with another gal who's a rock star. So she helps me with a lot of that one-on-one time, but just knowing your strengths and weaknesses too. I think like
Mm-hmm.
I'm good on the phone. Like
Mm.
I know like
Wow.
that's probably one of my favorite places is like, hey, let's have a really impactful, and it's a maximizes your time because you're like, hey, we've only got 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a really intentional, practical coaching development focused phone call, and you can cover a lot of ground. If you're strategic about things like that, which feels
Mm-hmm.
kind of old school. Like, hi, could I
I
call?
know
Like,
nobody
could
says
we
that
set up a
anymore that they're good
call?
on the phone.
But at the same time, like, there's and it's just integrated easier into people's schedules and lives. But I mean, like, that's something that I've leaned into, is just being very forward. Like, hey, could we set up a phone call,
Mm-hmm.
just for 30 minutes to just talk about you, how you're doing, how stuff with your group is going. I
I
just want to
love
help
that.
you. I just want to help you, crush it in your role. I want to help you win, whatever your language is, that kind of thing. So just to your
Yeah.
point, I think that there's so many little ways of,
Yeah.
rather than being like, oh, it's hard, it's not the same, so I'm just going to get together with the same 3, 4 leaders I'm really good friends with, and then
Yes, and
recycle
that's a
those things.
trap, right?
Yeah.
Like there's certain people just right off the bat you connect with easier, so you tend to gravitate toward them.
Yeah.
But what I do on my to-do list, I write a to-do list every week of things I need to be working on in my ministry life, my personal life, and then I have my ongoing section, things I'm always doing, and I put leaders in that. And I always think every week I need to at least have a personal touch point with two leaders. And I kind of look at like, who did I reach out to last week? Who can I reach out to this week? Whether that's a text, some of them like to voice text back and forth with me. Some of them like to actually go out, like, let's go grab coffee, or when's your lunch break? I'll take you to lunch or bring you lunch at work. One of my leaders is a librarian at a high school, so she can't leave for a long time. So I'm like, send me your order. If you can get me on campus, I'll eat with you in the library. And I've done that with her. Another leader likes to walk because she's loves to exercise, so I meet her at her house early in the morning and we walk and talk for like an hour and a half. And maybe like other leaders, it's just, could I catch them after a Tuesday night or Wednesday night program and talk? But the point is, however you do it, you need one-on-one time with each of these people. They need
Yeah.
you as a pastor. You
Hmm.
think of yourself as a youth pastor, and you are, but you are a pastor to leaders. You're a leader of leaders, and they need your pastoral care as
Hmm.
well. Um, so that to me has been huge. And then not only do they need to be connected to you, but practically speaking, they need to be connected to each other. So I try to create environments and ways that they can connect to each other. So the best ways that work for our team is we do leader night out, and we do that I think 3 or 4 times a year. So this last time I rented roller skates and we roller skated in the auditorium at church and put on music and played games, and then it turned into violent roller skate hockey. And it was brutal. These people are competitive.
We broke
Uh,
out the floor hockey set and it was game over.
Oh, they didn't even see people anymore. All they saw was the ball. And so it was like body slam, people on the floor. They didn't care. They just kept going. People are like trying to get up and slipping. No one stopped. Nobody helped anybody. It was like, get the ball.
Three
Um,
MCLs later, we had a champion and a church split.
And I'm like, this is where our kids get it. This is where our students, like I said, leader health and student health go hand in hand. Our students are super competitive. So, anyways, we do that, or we do a volleyball night, sand volleyball and food, or I invite them over to my house and we, do like a game night here at my house and dinner. So I just try to find ways to connect them to each other throughout the year. And then our big thing, which I would highly recommend, is a yearly leader retreat. So we do that every fall. And we stay at a cabin up in the mountains and just I don't have any agenda. I used to try to get to be like, all right, strategic leadership time. And then I realized we just need winter camp without students. So we eat really good food, we eat a lot of dessert, we play a lot of games, we stay up late, we sleep till whenever we want. We go on a hike when we feel like it. There's no agenda. And I didn't want them to feel like this was like some kind of bait and switch, like come relax, but also let's get some stuff done, because that's the three in me. I always am like, we gotta be working and getting stuff done. And I realize I am getting stuff done. We're getting healthy and we're having relationships. We're laughing together, making memories together. And that is pays dividends for a ministry. And I don't
Yeah.
like, don't get me wrong. I'm not doing this as like, oh, let's go to a cabin so you like each other. I genuinely love hanging out with these people. So this doesn't feel like work to me. This doesn't feel like some strategy that I'm implementing so I can have a healthier ministry. It's what I love. And it just so happens to create health. Like I would hang out with these people every weekend if we had the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is like, this blew my mind. Years ago, one of our senior pastors, I was venting about one of my staff that I was having a really hard time with. This was like a million years ago. So no one current, if you guys are listening, but he said, well, do you like working with them? And I'm like, no, I don't. It's just not working. And he goes, so stop working with them. I'm like, what? I can do that? And he's like, yeah, work with people you like working with, create that energy. And, it was just this freedom. Like, if we can, it's not always possible, but liking each other is a very big deal. So keep that
Yeah.
in mind as you recruit too, of like, could I see myself not like best friends going on family vacations together, but more like, if I were to have coffee with this person for an hour, would I really enjoy it? Or if I saw their car in the parking lot, would I be like, oh yeah, I can't wait to talk to them? Or would I be like, oh, they're here? Like you've got to really like each other. You have to have chemistry, and recruit people that are for you. Like a lot of youth pastors have people on their teams that are constantly grinding against everything,
Yeah.
and we can't just be like, okay, you're fired. I get that. But at the same time, be very careful with even those little attitudes of the people you're recruiting, because you want them to be your fan, not your foe. Or it's like that creates unhealth on leadership teams of
Yeah.
like, you don't like anything I do. You don't like anything about our ministry. Like you just want to be that little complainer constantly, and that trickles to the whole team. It just brings down that morale. You want people to be like for each other. So
Mm.
foster that environment, but be careful in your recruiting process too.
How do you, so you mentioned you're like, I'm Enneagram 3 achiever, you're like image, like accomplishment, those things that are kind of, come out of that. How do you feel like you keep a shepherd's heart for
Yeah.
your team, for the students, for what you do, and not, and like you said, not have it be something that is just a, and I don't know, I don't want to project on listeners who have
Yeah.
like, I've worked for people where I'm like, I know what you're doing, Like I
Mm,
think like you read like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and you know that like taking me to lunch is what was gonna make. I feel kind of manipulated. I know that you have good intentions,
yeah.
but it's really just because you want to move the ball forward on your agenda. And maybe that, and I think the longer you roll in leadership roles, you can smoke that. You can smell the, where there's smoke, there's fire, and you can sniff that stuff out. But I just
Right.
think as a leader, like, because there is a reality, like we have to, do these things, with a strategic mindset of saying like, hey, this is a reality. I need people on my team to feel loved. I need,
Mm-hmm.
I need to do these things to gather and build community, but I don't want to feel gimmicky and disingenuous. I want to do this from a shepherd's heart of compassion. I want to do it from a
Sure.
shepherd's heart of really leading people with authenticity. So how do you keep that? Have you ever struggled with that? How do you keep your heart, kind of pure in that way, as a
Mm-hmm.
leader?
That's a great question. What Enneagram are you, by the way?
Seven, wing eight. So I like having
Okay.
fun. I like partying and not being told what to do.
I love that.
And I need multiple admins to help me get anything done.
Well, okay. So, yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. Like, people can usually, like you said, if they're paying attention, see that you may see them as a means to an end, and I think that's hard. And a lot of pastors are Enneagram threes, and they want to see results and maximize things and work hard. And, people sometimes get in the way of that. And then they make people a commodity, or put their purpose and ministry first and the people second, like, or they put a process over a person, kind of thing. um so how do you keep that? Well, I would recommend a book on that. It's by the guy who founded our church, Larry Osborne. It's called Lead Like a Shepherd. And I thought it was so good. I told our campus pastor, like, hey, as a team, we have got to read this, because it just really puts in perspective, like, that soul care thing of making sure you're being the leader who has not gone so far in their leadership pursuits that you leave people behind. And how do you make people not feel um, like they're a box to check? Like, okay, great, strategic leadership. I made you feel important. I think it comes down to you being literally genuine. I think people, like I said, I would hang out with these people every weekend if I could. And I think I'm projecting, I legitimately like you. I'm curious about your life. It's not a strategy. I'm curious about who you are. It's not a strategy. I want to hang out and pour into you and see you succeed. That's not a strategy. If it were a strategy, I would think that they might be able to tell. One practical thing is, I think people are awful listeners for the most part, and nobody listens to anybody anymore. And they start to get a glazed over look on their face if you start talking about yourself. And then it's like, oh, okay, back to you. So, how was your weekend? Oh, well, let me tell you. And so I think just like listening, and like as pastors, we do a lot of talking, we're good at it. Let them talk. When I was saying I take that leader on a walk, I take her on a walk. Like, we go for a walk.
She's like
um,
like a dog.
I know. I'm like,
I
that
took
didn't
that leader
sound.
for a walk.
She had to burn some energy. Um, I ask her questions and then just let her go, partially because I can't walk and talk at the same time, or I feel like I'm going to die. She's got way more stamina than me, but also, like, I just love, like, okay, I really want to hear about your life. Let me ask you a question. Now you go. So I think when you're a good listener and ask people good questions, and not that it's a strategy, like you said, from How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think Dale Carnegie does talk about that in the book. But if it's coming from a genuine place, um, you know, only God knows the heart, right? But people can pick up on those things as well. That um, if you're just kind of a schmoozer. And I think being specific too. I used to work for someone and they would just kind of come by and give me a high five and say, "You're doing a great job." And I'd be like, "On what? Like, what do you mean? That could
Like,
mean
you
anything."
have no idea. We haven't had a real
Exactly.
conversation in 2 years. You don't know anything about my life.
Yes, Ryan. And I was like, so that's when it felt disingenuous. I'm like, don't just like, oh, I was going around and giving everyone high fives today and they felt
Yeah,
so special. No, I don't. You
right.
tell me exactly what was good and where this compliment came from, and I will accept it. But if you're just giving me a general high five, no. So I think being specific with people, being encouraging on that level, and um, asking good questions and listening, I think, is what translates to genuineness for our leaders. And if you legitimately aren't interested in them, that'll probably show through, and that
Yeah.
comes down to a heart thing on
Well,
your part, right?
and I think like the concept of a shepherd. What do shepherds do? They care, they protect, they
Yeah.
um, they invest, they help grow. All those things that the Lord does for us, all those things that the great pastors and small group leaders that we've been a part of do for us. They just serve. And I
Mm-hmm.
just believe it. Like, you just care about the things that you pray for. You care about the things that you serve. That I think your heart stirs and grows. Um, for that. And I think that goes for your team. I think it goes for your students. I was talking to a youth pastor the other day about kind of wrestling with their calling. Like, am I called to this? Am I called to? And I said, well, I don't really know what you're called to, but I do know that if you continuously serve this group of kids, that your heart will grow for it. That the
Mm.
Lord will stir something deeper inside of you that's going to come because it's where you're serving and it's where you're pouring your love and your attention and your affection into. I mean, it's the same with the Lord. Like, if you feel cold towards the Lord, we're called to draw near because he's gonna do that, draw something up inside of us the closer that we draw to him. And that's just the way that he's designed us to do with that, with people, with him, with our churches, with our communities. So, I'm just so much a reminder. I feel like I'm trying to encourage myself right now, just for seasons where that feels dry, just to lean in and to, like you said, lead like a shepherd and just continuously serve um, everywhere we are. So, but just to wrap up here before we close our time together, Kristen, just wanted to chat a little bit and shift gears into the resourcing that you do, and just kind of go under the hood a little bit about um, what you're doing with other pastors and leaders and why it's so important um, to have a coach in ministry, to have someone that is maybe farther along for you. And I know, like, I jotted a note down earlier of you just thinking about um, your past and how you felt like you had a gap in your life. You're like, man, I felt like I was looking for a mentor. I'm looking for leadership. I'm looking for people to help me get further faster, to keep growing and not burn out, all those things. How do you find that, and maybe talk through the importance for anybody listening about having people in their life to help coach and develop them, to help encourage them, which can sometimes, I feel like, in youth ministry, be hard to find.
You're right. Yeah, it can. The reason we have this ministry, so it's the ministry coach podcast, and it's on YouTube and all the platforms. And it was my husband's idea, Jeff, and he actually used to be one of my volunteers. So like we had a mutual friend and he was like, "Hey, I heard you do youth ministry. I've always wanted to like be a small group leader. Do you need help?" I'm like, "Yeah, come check it out." And we just became really good friends, and he was a small group leader for me. And um, the rest is history. But it was his idea because he was a part of my ministry when I was just first getting started in Fallbrook. And he's like, you've done it so long and your ministry has grown, your leaders, like how you were talking about. I think that's very quotable: care about what you pray for, and then also you will care about what you serve, as well. I think that's really beautiful. I wrote that down. Um, and he said, all those years you struggled, be what you wish you had. So now, 20 years later, we started the Ministry Coach podcast 4 years ago. So I would have been in ministry at 16 years at that point. And he's like, just be what you wish you had. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm busy. Like, I have a full time job. We have 2 kids. Like, I don't think I really need one other like project to be working on. He goes, no, really. And I'm like, I'm not like, you act like I'm some guru or something. I'm not. There's people out there that are doing way better ministry than me. And he's like, yeah, but you have, it's who's willing to help. And if you're willing to help,
Yeah.
then that's something. It doesn't mean you have to be the best. He's like, you just have to be willing. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So we started it, and then just watching the fruit come from that of, yeah, I wish I had a coach. I wish I had a mentor. Now I can do that for other people. Because the truth is, a lot of people get put into youth ministry because they're good with kids and they're fun and they need someone to fill that role. So they're like, you go do it. But there's no support that follows, there's no training that follows. And so these people find themselves in leadership positions when they're like, well, I was just good with kids. I mean, kids liked me. I was like a Pied Piper and magnetic and charismatic. Kids want to hang out with me. And so they're like, there you go, be a youth pastor. I don't know how to lead a team. I don't know how to manage a budget. I don't know how to plan an event. I don't know how to deal with angry parents. I don't know how to deal with health and conflict. And so that's really where we decided to step in. And so our little tagline is the coach for the coachless, because I think back to myself all those years ago, desperate for someone to kind of take me by the hand and say, all right, here's how you youth pastor. And I just hope that we can shorten the learning curve for some of these youth pastors and letting them learn from at our church, we call it dumb tax.
Yeah.
I paid the dumb tax so you don't have to, and give them the resources. So, I mean, being a mentor from afar, because you can tell people find a mentor all day long, but if there's no one in their church or in their circle that has the qualifications for that, it's like maybe there's a peer, but you really need someone further along than you that can show you the view from the top and help bring you along. But if they're a
Yeah.
peer, it's hard. If they lead a different type of ministry, maybe they're a senior pastor, not a youth pastor, that's tough. So we just said, hey, if you don't have a coach, we'll be your coach. If you don't have a mentor, we'll be your mentor. So, they sign up for the course, and we do group coaching calls, or people can do one-on-one coaching calls. But all the podcasts and YouTube channel stuff is just available for anybody. And then, we've been talking a lot on this episode about fruit. The fruit that's come out of it, like these emails I get from these pastors I never would have seen coming in a million years, where they were like, I was about to get fired. Like, I was hanging on by a thread. Like, my ministry was dwindling. My youth pastor had given me, or senior pastor had given me warnings. Like, I was on the chopping block, and then I found this channel, and oh my gosh, I just started putting things into place. And that's what we do. We just tell you, do this, not like, we really need to love people. Okay, how do we love them? And that's what I was desperate for. Tell me what to do, not theory. I'm not mature enough in this job to be able to make theory applicable. I need you to tell me what you are literally doing. Um, and so they'll write us these emails and just say, once I started implementing this stuff, things grew, or I loved my job again, or I got a raise and I kept my job, and we, are healthy now, or my leaders are finally happy. Like, I have a lower turnover rate, whatever their problem is. Um, and it's like, yeah, this is what I wish that I had. So here you go. At least I could do it for somebody else, and it won't take them like 16 years to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of the coaching world is that and most people, like, if you're in leadership and you're listening to this, like, God's called you to do it. You
You're
don't need
right.
somebody to get all the magic bullets. Like, you can do this. You just need people in your life. I think about, like, pro sports teams, Kansas City, obviously big Chiefs, you know. Andy Reid wasn't ever really that great of a football player. He's just an amazing coach. And what he's amazing at is helping these players who are already going, doing greater things than he'll ever have done on the football field. He just helps them see what they can't see. And I think that's what great coaches do.
Mm.
Is they say, hey, you can't see this in yourself. the potential inside of you. You can't see, like, when you're feeling discouraged and you need hope, you can't see that God's still doing something in you. I think that's why you need people in your life to do this. I think they help you see things in your ministry that you can't see because you're so used to, going into your messy bedroom and seeing all the stuff. And you're like, well, I guess that's just the way that it is, and helping you get your vision straight and look at things from a vantage point that you could never see on your own.
Yeah.
And it's the beauty of the body of Christ, of that God has gifted certain people with the gifts of wisdom and of leadership and of these other areas that I think are all, and the shepherd's heart, which I think are all essential to being a great coach for someone, someone that cares, someone that sees, and someone that's willing to have a hard conversation,
Mm-hmm.
willing to just help tell you things that nobody else will and help be a safe space for you. So if you need that, I know that's why you do what you do. Reach out to Kristen. If you need that, that's why I'm doing this. I would love to have a conversation. It's just to be a resource in a place to, if you maybe feel like you're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know. I feel like I need some resources and some help and some direction, encouragement, practical things. That's why we do this. So, Kristen, I really appreciate your ministry and what you do. It's been a great benefit to me over the years. I've been following your stuff for since you got started with it, and it's been really, really cool to benefit that from the content that you produce and just the conversations that you guys have. You and Jeff do a great job with all of that. Do you have maybe some final words of encouragement for anybody listening to this? Maybe if they're in a season that they're feeling challenged, they're feeling a little burned out,
Mm-hmm.
need a little bit of hope and encouragement.
Yeah, it'll probably sound a little counterintuitive, but one of my leadership mantras is leadership isn't fun. And so you're like, how's that encouraging? But it is in the sense that if it's hard and you feel challenged and you feel burnt out, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing leadership, and leadership is hard. And there's very few people, I think, that can do what we do. One lady said to me, if you can work with junior hires, you have to, because not everyone can. So you must. And I think that goes for all of student ministries, like we're caring for the souls of teenagers. And like, I think that's what keeps me going, of like, I am in charge of preaching the gospel in a way that young souls can grasp and understand, and then architect community around that they will feel so connected to the body of Christ that they'll never want to leave. Like, I can't think of anything more important in my entire life. Like, even if I was a surgeon, I would be like, okay, I saved your life, but who knows about the state of your soul? And so I just am like sometimes very sobered and encouraged by like,
Yeah.
we're doing big work. And I think in the church world, youth pastors get made fun of, or youth pastors is like, oh, grow up, or how long are you going to do this? And, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like,
You're like, this is the greatest calling.
it is the
Like there
greatest
there there
calling.
is almost, I mean, I think there's a family member, I won't say her name, but it's my mom. We
That's
were
not her
talking.
name. So you,
That's
you
not, her
held
name is not
true.
mom. Her name is not mom. Don't look her up. But she's like, well, when are you going to do something, make some more money, whatever? And I'm like,
My
mom,
dad used to always say that to me.
this is the greatest thing I can give my life to.
Absolutely. And
Like
my dad finally got that. Yep.
I'm like, mom, like we like every week we're baptizing kids. We're seeing kids delivered and healed and changed in the gospel. Kids families get connected. And I'm like, this is why we do what we do. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm like, this is it.
So
You
is it
know,
hard? Yeah, there's
of
very
course it
hard
is.
elements, probably on a spiritual level too, like trying to get us out of there, trying to challenge us to the point where we give up. So fun, we'll have fun moments, and I have a blast doing my job, but leadership is hard. It's not fun. Doesn't mean you're not doing it wrong. And like you said, highest calling ever. I mean, they say that if someone's going to accept Christ, the ripest time is like, I think between the ages of like 12 and 15. And so we're right in the thick of that. Of course, adults accept Christ all the time, but statistically, that's the highest time in somebody's life where
Mm,
they're receptive to the gospel. So we have, like, these are real, like, real eternities. Life is short. Hell is hot. Like we've got like work to do. So that's, yeah, what I would tell them. Keep going. Even when it's hard, it's supposed to be hard. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to skirt around that, but the reward is great. And I can't think of anything else worthy to put my time and my life toward, you know? I'm like, oh yeah, people just have regular jobs, huh? Like, you know, and you can do ministry in any context. I firmly believe you're a plumber and you're doing ministry, but I just pinch myself like I'm getting paid to do this with the rest of my life. Like, whoa, I feel very lucky.
That's pretty special. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for your time. This has been really encouraging to me. It's been challenging. I've got some things that some notes that I'm taking for myself and my own ministry. But I know this is going to be a big encouragement to everybody listening to this. How can people get in touch with you? Anybody that wants to reach out, they want to talk about coaching, they want to go to your website, check obviously your social, but you know, they want to maybe reach out to you. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so they can obviously get in touch with us at growyouthministry.com, and that is the website for the course. And then, you know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and that's at Ministry Coach. My personal Instagram is Lascola. So if they want to, you know, just get in touch with me. But yeah, we love to hear from you and see what one of our resources could be helpful to you. And yeah, we love youth pastors.
I love that. Awesome. Kristen, you're a rock star. Appreciate you. Thankful for your ministry. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode. If it was a blessing to you, my ask is that you would share this content with a friend, someone else in leadership and in ministry. I hope it was a blessing to you, and I hope that God blesses your ministry moving forward.